this movie is kind of like if someone went back in time and tried to make a movie explaining what social media is and the impact it has on society, right?
Well, it is an interesting period piece because I'm watching this movie and it's like, oh, I remember when books were a thing.
Yeah.
Um, I or like the newspaper, people are smoking indoors.
Yeah.
Like the 90s do not feel that long ago, but when you like just put it up on display, it's just like, oh, why don't they use their GPS? Oh, that's because they didn't have them.
They had folded paper maps in the back of the car.
But that is an interesting way of looking at it. We did look to writers before social media influencers.
I loved that idea of there's a couple lines that really struck with me that reality is just kind of what we tell each other it is. This whole movie is kind of about like reality changing its mind and choosing insanity instead. Like if God decided to have like an off day and we all paid for it.
I think it's appropriate that I saw this quote on social media. Right after watching this movie, which was given the choice between fiction and nonfiction, I'll always choose fiction because that at least makes sense to me.
Yeah. Unless you're reading Sutter Kane.
Yeah. Great name. A lot of great
Yeah.
names in this movie.
Yeah. The author Sutter Kane is kind of an anagram for Stephen King because he was the biggest author in the 90s in horror, at least. And at one point, Sutter Kane says the biggest problem people have with religion, or the biggest problem with religion, is that no one ever believed enough to make it real. And my books have sold over 1 billion copies. More people believe in my work than in the Bible. And his books are so horrifying that people have been going insane and committing acts of violence. And his latest book, In the Mouth of Madness, which is kind of a fun, this whole thing's kind of a fun meta trip up its own belly button, caused his agent to go insane and attack the film's protagonist, John Trent, played by Sam Neill, with an axe.
I think that's an interesting angle there too. So what I thought of throughout the movie, um, and this is going to show a blind spot in my intelligence,
Yeah.
um, but like I was like, oh, this reminds me of H.P. Lovecraft, and then I realized you've never read anything by H.P. Lovecraft. You're just going off this broad idea of what he did. Um, because my first thought was that this was like maybe like an adaptation of one of his books, and I think this was an original screenplay.
To my knowledge, it was an original screenplay that kind of paid homage to. It's kind of like if someone read all of Lovecraft's stuff and said, "Oh, I love this," and they made something that's their take on, like if Lovecraft himself is a genre at this point, then they're writing their own story within the Lovecraftian genre, is what it
I,
was.
I I think it'd be interesting to make this movie now,
Yeah.
because we brought up Neil Gaiman and H.P. Lovecraft, and I think the one thing that would snap these people out of their insanity is some death of the author. Um,
How
it's
so?
just sort of, well, I just mean like it's like they're walking through the streets with axes, like ready to like take over the world, and then someone's like, "Wait a minute, Sutter Kane had a problematic tweet 10 years ago." And everyone's just like, "Oh, I can't be associated with someone problematic."
Sutter
Never
Kane
mind.
was at the Capitol riot. Come on, guys.
Yeah, something like that. Because
I would love to see an updated take on this, just because I think it's so relevant to our current society of, you know, there's points where people can't quite agree what's real anymore. Because if you took Sutter Kane's books and just called them Twitter, then, you know, it's you would see a lot of a schism that we have, and not to get like super political or anything, but some people are like, "Oh, birds aren't real," and I'm like, "No, birds are pretty objectively real, guys. Like that's a thing that's real." you know. And
I,
go
I've
ahead.
often wondered if the birds aren't real thing is just the youngins trying to troll us.
That's possible. It sounded so stupid. I just assumed it was true. Or it was a true conspiracy anyway. One thing that I think I had a problem with, or one thing that I couldn't quite buy in all the way on this movie was Sam Neill as John Trent, right? Because and it's the part where Sam Neill is kind of like trying to talk. Styles into going to have dinner with him, basically to like to hook up with her. And he plays this guy who just like it's meant to be kind of like not it feels like he started off as working class but became successful, but he makes a living exposing scumbags and is just a touch scummy himself, rough around the edges. But like also Sam Neill, I think, was everyone's manic pixie dream stepdad in the 90s because like of the Jurassic Park thing, you know? Like you and I are about the same age. We saw Jurassic Park in theaters. We both were probably about 5. And Sam Neill for me was like, you like if your real dad's not there, he's the stepdad you want, right? And
Well, what I thought about a lot with Sam Neill is sort of like what could have been with his career, what more could have been with his career, because like in the 90s, I mean, he had Jurassic Park and The Piano in the same year, and under normal circumstances, that would make someone like an A-list celebrity,
yeah,
but he didn't really have that much big work in the 90s after that. Like I think like I know he was just in the most well one of the most recent World movies. Ooh, that's hard to keep track of. Um, but it's just sort of like it's like oh I mean he had this, but it was like all right, Event Horizon. It was like well, I feel like he should have been in more.
maybe he was just one of those guys that was just like, I got Jurassic Park money, so I'm good. Like he just kind of does. Like you've always seen him off doing something. He
Well, he's also not American, so maybe he just didn't want to keep traveling for work.
There's also that. Maybe he's just like maybe he just likes his kids and his wife. That's also possible.
What a
He's
monster.
what a monster. And maybe that's me projecting the sort of, everyone's favorite 90s stepdad vibe onto him, right? But yeah,
Like Jurassic Park's my favorite movie still, so it's like it's always good
so
to see
good.
him.
So good. And like as society is sort of like unraveling under as Sutter Kane's book spread, Trent, played by Sam Neill, has to figure out what the scam is. And so he has to go to this fictional town called Hobbs End to investigate Kane's disappearance. And Kane's editor, a woman named Styles, is sent with him. And I do like Styles. And she's read the final book and she's understands that they're all in a book, that the reality of fiction is superseding the shared reality of their collective sanity and and then she starts like kissing Trent and she's saying, I'm losing myself, John, I'm losing myself. And then she goes, please don't let me do this alone, because she knows what's coming next and she knows the end is coming. And that brings me to when they find Sutter Kane, right? Because Styles finds Kane and he says, for years I thought I was making it all up, but like demons from other dimensions were giving him the stories and the power to make it all real. And now he is, and he's writing this book in the mouth of madness. But what were your kind of thoughts of like of the antagonist of Sutter Kane? Did it make sense? Did it flow for you? What do you think?
Again, I think this movie could have stood to be funnier. I
Yeah,
liked some of the like little directorial choices that were made. Like when Sutter Kane is sitting next to Sam, I'm just gonna call him Sam Neill,
go for
on the bus, and he goes, "Have I mentioned that my favorite color is blue?" And then just touches
it.
to a blue filter on the bus, and Sam Neill's freaking out. I'm like, that's a cool touch. The movie, I think, needed more of that.
Yeah. I think for me, this movie again, I saw all of the John Carpenter classic before the age of 10, and the idea of characters realizing that they're in a work of fiction inside the fiction. And what does that do for the characters? How does that break down their reality? Do the characters talk to the writer, whatever? I think that idea influenced a lot of my writing and it stuck with me at a real early age. Now, something I didn't really super get into in this was the practical effects because a lot of the practical effects seemed like they were leftovers from the thing, like the tentacles that kind of like flung under the doors and stuff. And
Yeah, I'm always happy to see practical effects. Like it's like oh, something from a bygone era. Or
yeah,
Sets are always delightful.
sets are always delightful. But the surprising thing was like these effects were done by a group called the Kane B FX Group, And like the monsters themselves look kind. I wish they didn't show any of the monsters
Agreed.
because, and which was surprising because that effects house that did this was founded by Robert Kurtzman and Greg Nicotero. Like those are the guys for
They,
practical effects.
I got very excited watching the opening credits because I saw them and I'm like, the effects are gonna look amazing. They did not.
Yeah, the VFX were done by Industrial Light and Magic. So like when Kane sort of like rips himself and tears himself into a page, right? And then it's a hole to go to the demons, and then Styles is reading the book, and Styles is like, "You should come with me." And or no, Trent's like, "You should come with me," and Styles is like, "I've read to the end. I can't. This is how I die." And it felt kind of filler at so that last 15 minutes. I'm like, "Oh, you guys shot two little movies, so you had to kind of pad it out, like his trip from like Hobbs End back to like Manhattan." Felt like you could have cut that and cut it straight to where he's like back in Charlton Heston's office talking to him. I think the ending is probably what stuck with me the most out of all of it was because when he gets home, Charlton Heston, who is the publisher, says, "Yeah, you brought us the book months ago, and there's a movie coming out. And who is Styles?" And as a writer, I kind of see what they did is where we don't need to have a reaction to Styles being gone and the book is coming out. You just say that it did. It was a time jump, right? But then that kind of raises the question, was Styles even necessary in the first place? Or could you have cut her entire character and had the same movie? What do you think?
I say keep her just because I thought she was an interesting character.
Yeah.
And like as soon as like Beautiful Woman's introduced, I'm like, okay, so she's the love interest. But I'd say keep her. Um, yeah, we haven't really brought up Charlton Heston being in this movie. Um, Always interesting to see him in a film. I loved his character's name. Was it Jackson Harglow or something like that? I bet they just had fun coming up with names.
Yeah. And, Charlton Heston in the 90s kind of had a cool run. He was in True Lies. That was pretty good.
Um,
Um,
he was also in Wayne's World 2 and was quite funny in that cameo.
I need to rewatch that. Kind of where the end kind of picks up for me is where Trent's at the bookstore and the world's falling to shit, and he sees this guy and goes, "Do you like the book?" And the man has like the weird mitosis eyes that Kane's agent had earlier in the movie, where like people are morphing, and the man's like, "Yeah." And then Trent says, "You won't be surprised about this," and just chops him with an axe. But like at this point, Trent hasn't really read one of the books yet, and he's one of the few sane ones left. So let me ask you this. Did he kill that man to get locked up, or did he kill him because Kane wrote him that way?
I think Kane wrote him that way.
Yeah.
Because it is tough to see America's stepdad like to be so unlikable, do these bad things, and I'm like, it's like, all right, once you kind of get to this point of no return, I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna not like this character.
Yeah. But I loved because Trent's monologue at the end of it, when he's talking to David Warner, star of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, he's saying to him, "It's safer in here now. It'll get worse out there. Every species can smell its own extinction. The last ones won't have a pretty time of it. In 10 years, maybe less, the human race will be a bedtime story for their children." I wish the whole movie was just that. If you're gonna only spend $8 million on a movie and have it be a horror movie, don't even try to have VFX. Just throw incredible world-class actors in there like David Warner and Sam Neill. Those two could probably do a two-hander movie the whole time. Just have it be them talking in the fucking
That
cell.
would have been so much better. And you know what I think they could have done? I mean, the movie wouldn't have been as exciting for most audiences, but whatever,
Mhm.
they're dumb.
Yep.
If it had just been like them talking in that padded room, and like explain the whole story, and then it cuts to Sam Neill leaving the padded room, and we see that the world actually did, you know, blow up.
Yeah.
And then he walks into the movie theater and watches what happened. That would be a cool like short movie or even like a play.
Yeah. Or in the whole time Sam Neill's talking to David Warner, they're like, the audience is asking, is Sam Neill crazy? Because obviously he's a crazy person, right? Like we're going to be predisposed because we all agree in a shared reality that Sutter Kane's books aren't real. And so our POV character is going to be David Warner. We're going to want to agree with David Warner. But no, that would be fuck. I wish it was that movie instead. You and I have to make that movie one day.
Absolutely.
But
Am I the David Warner here?
you're whoever you want to be.
All right. Well, that's the theme of the movie, creating your own universe.
Exactly. There you go. And to go to the end, I loved, like you're saying, I loved how, he's just watering this empty streets. There's a few emergency radio broadcasts going. He walks in, he sees the movie In the Mouth of Madness playing. He kind of accepts the new reality, right? Because he's seen everyone else go insane. And so he thought, hey, I'll join this party. And he just goes and watches himself. And the movie ends with him laughing hysterically. Now, would you watch that movie or would you just go find like a mountain somewhere to live on?
Um, you know what? If there's popcorn, I think I'd watch the movie.
That's really fair. Now, what would you think would you be your favorite scene on this?
Um, favorite. Oh, my favorite scene's the beginning. The
Yeah,
mix of Sam Neill losing his mind and David Warner talking with him. Like the movie is not as entertaining once we leave the insane asylum.
absolutely. And that is my favorite part. And for me, although I think my favorite scene was in Hobbs End when the town's kind of falling apart and Sam Neill's in a bar and he finds a local and the local's got a shotgun and the local sticks the shotgun in his own mouth and Trent says don't. The local guy says I can't help it. He wrote me this way, right? And he
Well,
blows his brains
that's
out.
not just any local man. That's Vigo the Carpathian
Shut up.
from Ghostbusters 2.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm
I
sure he has a name, but he's Vigo the Carpathian to us.
once and forever. I but that scene of Viggo the Carpathian eating the business end of a double barrel was like that for me at 8 years old. The concept of characters in a book learning that they're not real and their entire reality is false and like their everything is collapsing has stuck with me ever since. And it makes you question the very nature of reality itself and what is real. But anyway, Pete, any final thoughts?
No, I'd give this 2 out of 4.
I love
Not
it.
bad, but I never need it in my life again.
Absolutely. And this for me is it's a childhood favorite, right? But it's as I get older, I'm like, oh, I could see where, things could be different. You reevaluating things that in middle age that you saw as a kid. It's kind of nice.